All right. Any initial remarks that you have on your end, Nick?
I'm just making sure everybody has the this particular link, and I don't want to tease too much or get people too excited. But I hear over the next couple days you have some special guests on these calls, so looking forward to that. I think it's a special opportunity for a lot of people.
Yeah. So tomorrow I'm going to have someone from Bernstein come on. Uh, Bernstein is, I think, in my opinion, one of the best in terms of research as far as um, investment management, state of the economy, etc. So I'm going to have my friend Aaron Marburg come on and chat with us and share Bernstein's perspective and what they're seeing and how their clients are responding to things. And then Friday, I'm going to have Rachel Kirshner come on from BNY Mellon. Rachel's maiden name is Mellon, Rachel Mellon. So her family started the Mellon part of BNY Mellon. I think she's seventh generation. They manage something like 37 trillion in assets, 1/4 of all the global assets. So she's going to come on and share her perspective on things as well. So a couple guests, if you guys have other people who you're interested in hearing from or other topics, I'll bring those folks on as well and reach out to my contacts. So yeah, they're happy and glad to come on and, like I said, share their perspective and maybe they'll be gracious to come on more frequently as we kind of navigate the coming weeks and months. So get your financial market questions, I guess, ready for the next couple of days and economy related questions for them.
Awesome. Super excited for that. And everybody should have the right link now. So we might see people jumping on here. And as per usual, as we're rolling, drop your chat. I was talking with Brooke Elder. She homeschools every day, already used to it. That is an advantage for people that already homeschool. They got a little bit of less of a learning curve to deal with on top of all this chaos.
Right. Yep. You can see all the art supplies and stuff. Controlled chaos in my office. We're the only, for those of you, this is the first time you're tuning in. We're the only people in my office. So a couple weeks ago, we kicked everybody else out, sent them home, and tested our remote technology. Everything's working fine, but I feel comfortable coming to the office because I'm literally the only person and have been for a couple of weeks, 2.5 weeks at this point. And so yeah, like Nick said, drop your questions in. Yesterday I sent out a blast. Everybody that's here or got the link to this should have received the email, but the Treasury announced that there's a automatic 90-day extension for tax payments. As of right now, all we know is that they're an extension for 2019 related income tax. And so rather than your final payment for 2019 being due on April 15th, you've got an additional 90 days from there to make the payment free of any penalties and interest. It does not extend the due date of your return. So all that to say, you could always get a 6-month extension for your returns. So nothing has changed there. If you need an extension to file your return, that option is still there for 6 months. So really the only change is that you get an additional 90 days to pay the tax due. We haven't gotten a clarification yet if that also means the Q1 payment. So Q1 payment for tax due for 2020, if that will also be pushed out. So don't know that yet, hoping to get clarification. I know the ACPA is working on getting a clarification. So as soon as we know, I'll share that with you, either via email blast or depending on the timing in this group as well. So again, 90-day extension for payment, assuming that you owe less than $1 million. If you owe more than $1 million, you got to still pay by April 15th. Or if you're a C corporation, it's $10 million in tax. So if you owe more than $10 million, you don't get you don't get the extension. If you're a C corp, if you owe more than 1 million as an individual, you don't get the extension. Everybody else does automatically for payment, not automatically for your return. You still have to file that. The message
Quick,
that, oh, go ahead.
quick question. I'm just going to answer, or I'm just going to bring them up as they drop in, so you don't have to worry about watching. To take advantage of the 90-day delay, do we have to request deferment through the IRS website?
No. No. No request.
Cool.
Just automatic. So yeah, good question. So the message that I have for everyone is if you have a refund, let's get that in ASAP. As of right now, there are no delays in refunds being processed. The way it's supposed to work is that you get it directly. If assuming you do direct deposit, you get it the Thursday after when your return has been filed. So if you filed today, which is Wednesday, not this Thursday, tomorrow, the following Thursday is when refund is supposed to be directly deposited into your account. Sometimes there are delays. Those are outside of our control. That's really IRS processing sort of thing. But you can get your refund fairly promptly. At least as of right now, there aren't delays. And then the other thing that we're emphasizing to folks is get certainty around your tax due. So there's no reason to not have your return completed. You just don't necessarily need to pay. So the sooner you've got certainty on what you owe, the better, at least as far as I'm concerned. So I would encourage everyone to still kind of proceed as if the deadline is April 15th in terms of getting your information in and getting a firm calculation on what is due, so that you can save and plan accordingly, and then you can take advantage of waiting 90 days to actually have to pay the remainder. I see, is there a Q&A? There's a question. Do taxes have to be filed to get a refund, or can you get one based on estimated taxes if you file an extension? You can only get a refund if you actually submit your return. So only way to get the refund, file the return. Don't have to file anything to get the extension on the actual payment due. Like I said, if you're just signing in, my daughter's here with me on her iPad right now watching Pokemon. So that's her new jam, is Pokemon.
That's awesome. I heard she was invisible sometimes.
Yeah, if you're a friend of mine on Facebook, she did her first Facebook Live yesterday and shared with the world that she is both a fairy and a unicorn, and has the ability to be invisible. So look out, world.
Yep. Another Q&A just dropped in. Do you recommend applying for an emergency SBA loan?
Yeah, okay. I'm glad that question got asked during this call. So I'm going to drop in the link for the SBA loan in the chats. So let me grab that link. I think I might have included that in the email yesterday. I don't think there's any downside to applying for the SBA loan. I'm happy to help, happy to review your application before you submit it as well. It's going to be priority based. So in other words, it's going to be a combination of who gets the requests in first and who has the biggest need. So the better that you're kind of positioning yourself in the application, the more likely you are to get approved, and sooner rather than later. So I don't think there's any downside to applying, and I'm happy to take a look at your application before you submit it.
Cool. Best way to get it to you? Email?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep. So I think what you're going to have to do, I don't think there's a way to do like an accountant's access like there are with other platforms where you can kind of give me read-only access. So I think, unfortunately, the way the SBA site is set up right now, you'd have to give me your login credentials and trust that I'm not going to submit it. I'm just going to review it and give you feedback, and I won't make any changes. Fortunately, there's not that system control, as far as I can tell at this point, where I could review it, give you feedback without having your login credentials. financials. So that's unfortunate, but kind of is what it is. So if you want me to take a look, just email it to me, include your user ID and password. Good
Awesome.
questions. Yeah, let me know if there's any others.
I have a Tony Banta, who's a good friend of ours in our world. I have a client days away from bankruptcy, and unfortunately, that seems kind of to be very common, especially for service businesses. A lot of service businesses do have clients that are days away from bankruptcy. So that's something. If we have time, I don't know. I haven't seen the notes for today. How do we address that? I had somebody ask me yesterday, actually, has gym owners, just does marketing, sales, and business development for gym owners. Said, hey, all my gyms, all my clients had to shut down, and they're days away from going under. So interested in your perspective on some of that stuff too, if we have time today.
Yeah. Well, the methodology that we talk about is first we optimize and we maximize. So that's just basically to say that maximize, trying to have the most today, or trying to do everything today. Optimize is what's the most critical path forward. So there's a downside or potential risk blind spot for folks when we're in a heightened state of emotion where we're trying to do 20, 30, 40 different things. And we need to really prioritize and figure out what the lead domino is. So what is the most critical issue that needs to be solved, that then once we knock that down, we can move to the next. So we really need to make sure that we've are mindful of, are we trying to maximize rather than optimize. So easier said than done, but I think the first step there, we sort of have used the analogy before. What's the first thing that you do if you're drowning? You have to decide that you want to get your head above water, and then from there actually take action to do that. So asking the right questions, what are we really trying to solve for? So in the case of we're days away from bankruptcy, we need to rank. We need to build out our plus minus list. So just as a refresher, if you haven't been here on the previous days, plus minus list is on the bankruptcy side. They probably aren't going to have very many pluses at this point, but what are the things that we would buy in order of priority if they were on discount, and how much of a discount would they need to be on? And then the minus is what are the things that we're going to subtract, cut out right away. And then what are the trigger points for things that we're going to eliminate in the future? So ASAP, we all, whether we're in a state of days away from bankruptcy or not, we should be evaluating in order, rank order, our minus list. What are the things we're going to cut? And I usually say, if you're able to come up with things pretty quickly, chances are those things could be cut now. You don't need to wait for the trigger point, because you really have to reflect on, is this actually a necessary expense? So get our minus list, and then we take our outstanding bills and we rank order them or sort them based off order of magnitude. So largest to smallest in balance or future balance. And we start calling those vendors and asking for some form of payment plan or deferment. So the both fortunate and unfortunate circumstance that we all find ourselves in is that we all find ourselves in this circumstance. So oftentimes a bankruptcy is kind of this isolated issue where the vendors might have a lot of questions about how you've been running your business, and can you really not pay me? But in this case, it's an extreme situation where we've got, some have suggested 1/5 of the workforce became unemployed this week. Now, I haven't been able to. It's been published in several different sources, but I don't know that it's been fully validated. But the reality is that I think there's a broad understanding that lots of companies are facing bankruptcy, and that's just to say that you're going to you're not going to be surprising your vendors when you call them and you say, hey, I can't pay you, or I can only pay you a portion, or I need to work out some sort of plan. But it's kind of as soon as possible. The sooner you work out the plan, you don't want to be the last to ask. In other words, ideally you're the first to ask, or one of the first to ask for a payment plan. Likely you're going to get more favorable terms. And bankruptcy is somewhat of a loaded word, because it assumes that the creditors have taken some action, where they're filing liens and levies against your accounts and taking all of this action, where this essentially they're forcing you to file bankruptcy because they filed all these liens against your account, so you can no longer operate your business or personally. But I'm suspecting, and this is just one of those, on Monday I talked about subjective, objective, and phenomenological data. So phenomenological is based off my experience. So this is more of a phenomenological data point. From my experience, at this point, 2 weeks in, to almost 3 weeks into this situation in the U.S. at least, I doubt that vendors are really actually taking legal action such that they would already have a lien or levy in place on your assets. So all that to say, I'm not trying to downplay the financial crisis that so many folks find themselves in. But unlikely, they're more likely 6 to 12 months away from actually having to file bankruptcy. They've got a window of opportunity to really negotiate with their vendors, negotiate with their contractors and employees, to buy some time, really. And I think tomorrow and Friday, when we have the Bernstein folks and the BNY folks, we can get their perspective on as well from their research teams on how long we can kind of expect this to last based off the data that we have right now. Yesterday I shared from at least a perspective from John Hopkins that these pandemics typically last about 3 months, and the sort of in a normal bell curve, the midpoint would be somewhere around middle of April. Unfortunately, you don't know that you're at the peak until you're after the peak. So a few folks have reached out to me and asked me, are we in a recession? And the challenge with concluding we're in a recession is that by definition, a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth. And so you don't know that you're in a recession until you've been in a recession for 2 quarters. It's a definition thing, but clearly we're in a period of economic contraction. The point of that statement, though, is to say you don't know you're at the peak of this whole issue until you're after the peak, because there's the trailing indicators of cases and everything. Nick, I see we've got so Tony, is that helpful in terms of, I guess maybe to summarize, first we optimize and we maximize. So we're going to try to make sure we figure out the lead domino. Then we're going to work through our plus minus list. We're going to rank order our vendor balances and future balances, and then we're going to start making phone calls. And then from your end, you just reassure folks, look, it's dire, but in terms of actually having to file bankruptcy, that's 6 to 9 months away likely, and a lot can turn around, hopefully, knock on wood, between now and then, that there's a rebound.
Yeah, I'm gonna just gonna jump in, and because I think it's so natural for me and maybe for you, because it's in the cash flow engineering. It's actually part of the process in the workbook.
Yeah,
is those the relationships and the communication. I would have conversations before you start making assumptions. Something that I went through, because I slept on my gym. When I had a gym, I slept on my gym floor. So I didn't really have a choice. But nobody really wants to lose your business, and just a conversation more often than not people are willing to work with you. So I think we make a lot of assumptions. We start doing math, panic, make decisions that may have been easier, or we may have more leverage or information if we just reach out to, the person that owns the building and say, hey, I don't know how I'm going to pay rent. I don't know how I'm going to pay for this. I think a lot of people, whether it be assumptions or pride or whatever, don't have those conversations. And I think anybody panicking right now or anybody in a tight spot, having those conversations will provide a ton of relief and perspective and give you a little bit more accurate time frames. So I just want to point that out, because I think we discount that. Like, sometimes the best advice I give to people is like, well, did you talk to them? They say no. I say, well, why don't you try that first before we start figuring out what we're going to do? Just talk to them. Just have a conversation. It's a really powerful framework. And that's also what I love about the cash flow engineering is it's actually built in to communicate with your vendors, even when times are not so chaotic.
Yeah. The principle that I use and that I always come back to is don't negotiate with yourself. So it's easy to have this pretty substantial conversation with yourself about all these vendors and how they're going to react and what they might say and how they're going to view you going forward. And you just have this whole negotiation, and so you end up offering terms or acquiescing. And alternatively, my approach with the vendors would go, hey, as you know, this coronavirus has been, or as you might be able to imagine, this coronavirus is really impacting my business and cash flow. What terms can you offer me? Full stop. No additional explanation, defensiveness. You don't need to. It ends up a lot of these times when I've seen clients make these requests, it's like a 3-scroll email with everything that's going on and all the background and all the things that they're willing to do in the future when things turn around, making all these commitments. And really, you're just negotiating with yourself. So, in light of the coronavirus and the impact that it's having, how can you work with me on payment terms? And then let them respond. And based off their response, then you can counter. Ideally, and Nick knows that I do this. Bye, David. David says you got to run. Ideally, you already have a pre-prescribed outcome that you're looking for. So when you've already defined the terms, because you've done the plus minus list, you've done the sorting by vendor, you've hopefully worked through the whole cash flow engineering process that we have, and so you already know what the terms are that you're seeking. So when they respond, then you compare it against what you were looking for, and then you make a counteroffer. But oftentimes I find is that by not providing a bunch of fluff and not providing assurances of the future, hey, I promise you when things change, I'm going to do X, Y, Z, or as soon as I get money, I'll pay you faster. You're making commitments that aren't necessary in the front end. Oftentimes you get better terms. But we don't know what the future looks like. Currently, there's a lot of uncertainty, clearly. And so simply just get payment terms and not make any commitment about, well, if things turn around, I'll pay you faster. Don't even say that. Because you don't know.
I have I have clients even that will say, hey, Nick, will you negotiate this for me? This is what I want. And I'll have to come back and say, it's just the concept, right? And say, hey, this is what I got you. And they say, how did you get that much? And the answer is, I had no presuppositions. I just went and said, what are you willing to offer? And it's often more than what the client has. Like they've negotiated themselves. They had the conversation. They've made it this big thing. And really, oftentimes they would be better off just saying, hey, this is what I have to offer. This is what I need. What can you do? And letting the other person just finish the sentence, finish the thought. So don't discount the conversation. I can't tell you how important that's been. We did a whole series called People Helping People, which was pretty much, hey, we just talked to people and these are the good things that have come out of it. And we gave some case studies and stuff, but
Yeah.
now's the time to have some conversations, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, and for a lot of you, you've heard me talk about this several times, but the two Oreo principle is certainly in play in this case. So the backstory on the two Oreo principle is that I guess almost 2 years ago now, I stepped on the scale and I was trying to figure out how did I gain 10 pounds, and I was self-reflecting and thinking, okay, I didn't really, am I working out much differently? No, not really. My diet on the surface, has it changed much? Not really. And then I realized when we moved homes, I saw where my wife's snack cabinet is, and she's just really good at like buying some snacks and just like having one, and kind of like pacing herself over the course of days and weeks. And I don't want to know where the snacks are because I'm basically just going to eat all of them. And so what I realized was basically now that I now that I knew about the snack cabinet, I was like, I think I've over the last year consumed the equivalent of 2 additional Oreos per day. And because I'm a nerd, I ran the numbers, the calorie numbers. And if you do single stuffed, it's around 10 pounds that you'll add over the course of the year. And if you do double stuffed, which let's be honest, why does single stuffed even exist at this point? But if you're doing double stuffed, it's like 12 and a half pounds. And so that was sort of the backstory on the two Oreo principle, which is how seemingly small things compound into something large. So 2 Oreos on the surface don't seem like much, but based off compounding over the course of the year, it adds up to something that now requires a significant amount of effort to address. And so in our financials, I often see all these 2 Oreos, long story long here, which are all these one-off little expenses, $10 here, $20 there, $50 there, that that hit people's accounts, and they go, oh yeah, I should really cancel that. I'm not really using it. But my time is too valuable. We talked, I don't know, for a half hour about the whole cognitive dissonance around my time is too valuable. But my time is too valuable to sit on the phone and deal with canceling this expense. But then over the course of the year, when you add it all up, that 30 minutes that you would spend adds up to $2,000. And so then if you were to say to someone, would you spend 30 minutes to make $2,000? Like, yeah, I would. It's just they're looking at it through the lens of, I don't have 30 minutes to save $80 now, or whatever the math is, in the monthly expense. So the Two Oreo Principle is basically once a quarter, go through your financials and identify all those seemingly small transactions that actually add up to a fairly substantial amount. And we've got a whole methodology for it, but it comes back to, is it core? Is it a core expense, meaning it's necessary to operate your business? And then what is the associated, if it's in the business context, what is the associated savings? And so there's a few different lenses that you can look at savings, but often we have all these expenses that we've said are like, oh, they're saving me time or they're necessary, but they really aren't. So back to kind of the whole bankruptcy thing, but just as a kind of disciplined approach to your business on a quarterly basis, going through and cutting out those expenses. If you want to make them bubble up to the surface, can't have your credit card or your debit card be reissued so that you get a new debit card or credit card number. Now all of a sudden you're going to get all these email alerts. So there are some vendors that it's almost impossible to cancel, and so the best way to actually be able to work it out is get a new card issued so that they now are reaching out to you and you get to opt back in. Some cards like Capital One have the ability for you to lock your card so that you can't have it processed. So one thing as well, Tony, for your bankruptcy potential client, is if I were them, I would ASAP get new cards issued, because there's probably some auto transactions that are hitting their account. And if cash is already tight, they may open their account tomorrow and be like, oh crap, I didn't think about this automated expense that is hitting my account right now, or just hit my account. So I know some of you might point out that certain vendors have the ability to get the cards updated numbers so they can process it again later once they get the bounce back. But it buys you some time at least to bubble up to the surface these charges that maybe you forgot about. The most nefarious ones are the ones that aren't monthly, the things that hit once a year or quarterly, especially those once a year renewals for annual expense, some annual thing like a app on your iPhone that, or iPad or whatever that you downloaded that's going to renew once a year. And now all of a sudden you open up your account, you have this $800, $1,000 annual charge that you forgot about. So probably a keystone action right now to get your cards just reissued so that you can break the auto transactions before they hit your account.
Yep. I broke it down in my newsletter, and I've shared it before. And I buy stuff. I'm a buyer. I'm the ultimate buyer. A hair over $2,200 a month in personal expenses. The business is probably worse. First time I heard Dan talk about this, I sat down and did it. $2,200 a month. Then now it gets redirected somewhere that gets a decent return, and that adds up. It adds up significantly. And I also canceled my card. I'm getting all the notifications now. And you just realize paying for a lot. I haven't opted back into much. So even though I didn't cut it when I was cutting expenses, because it was like, I'll keep that. I do not have a desire to opt back in. So there's a few extra bucks a month just sitting there.
Yeah, and we could do a little bit of fun with numbers just to illustrate the point too. Danger zone here because I'm doing a screen share. I'm sure I'll mess it up, but you can just Google future value calculator. So this is what I think you might have done for your newsletter, but number of periods, this is generally the number of years, or you could reflect it in months. So in your case, if you had $2,200 that you're saving, let's say the starting amount is $0, and you said you saved $2,200.
Yep. And 7.9 is what I get on average over the last 2 years. I've only had it for 2 years, this account.
And so 7.9% is the annual.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay, so if we took 2,200 times 12, so the annual amount that you're going to put in is 26,400, and you're going to get a 7.9% return. So in 10 years, that becomes 380,000, and then in 20 years, if you just automate the savings that you were spending on stuff you weren't using already, that's 1.2 million. So a lot of the folks who are kind of, generally speaking, struggling with saving and what am I going to do with retirement, a lot of these, what we call Two Oreos, if you just took that and cut it from things you weren't really using anyways and redirected it, just the power of compound interest. Of course, if you blow this out, if you started early and you did it for 40 years, then you got 6.7 million. So it's just fun with numbers. Historically, the S&P, and of course we're in this like crazy time period right now. So if you looked at it in like the last 5-year window, it'd be crushed by the recent performance. But historically, if you just put it dollar cost averaged into the S&P and you got 9.8%, that's going to be 11 million. So compound interest. So you can just go here and kind of play with what's the real impact of this $500 a month, 1,000, in your case 2,200. In businesses, we end up seeing thousands. We did it with for somebody, and they had 120,000 in expenses they couldn't account for what they were really using it for. So obviously an extreme scenario, but if they just automated that into something boring, in 20 years they would fully fund their retirement. Um, so obviously a little bit of fun with numbers because there's some assumptions about historical rate of return or average rate of return and all of that. But that said, James Roberts, thanks for the question. Back to this, and some of you I know tuned in late or recently signed in. So the thing I mentioned in the beginning is that yesterday the Treasury announced that the due date for returns is not extended. So April 15th is still the due date. You can always file a 6-month extension. So due date has not changed for filing your returns. The due date without penalties and interest for paying any tax due has been extended 90 days. So James was asking, do I still have to file by April 15th? I won't have all my stuff. No, you still have to get an extension to file. So still need to file an extension for the return itself. You don't have to file an extension on the payment due. So if you've already filed your return or you're going to file your return by April 15th, file away. You just don't have to pay for 90 days after April 15th. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, those that Two Oreo stuff is I go back to it pretty frequently. Big difference.
So if you guys have questions, again, drop them in the chat or in the Q&A, and we'll tackle those. Otherwise, we'll just kind of keep jamming on things that we're seeing and questions that we're getting. Nick, just to put you on the spot here, what's the biggest question that you're getting from your private clients? And for a lot of folks who maybe don't know Nick has several businesses, but one of which is a business with 42 private clients that he works with kind of a one-on-one basis. And I know he's been flooded with panic calls, mostly marketing and sales related, I think. But what is if you had to choose one, the question that you're getting?
Yeah. So the cool thing is I got 42 and not necessarily 42 different industries, but no two people do the same thing, which is cool. I see some of them on here. So the cool thing is I can look for the commonalities and, hey, look, 42 people doing 42 completely separate businesses. Surprisingly, it's probably a function of the fact that Dan, you are in that group and they look to you, and a lot of them are your clients, and surprisingly, not many of them are a few days of running out of cash, which is great. The question, I get two main questions right now. One is, should I be concerned? Because the people, their sales calls, their metrics are going down. I have not had a lot of people lose money yet. Most of them are not brick and mortar, and if they are, they have a remote component. First one is, should I be concerned? People are now no longer showing up to the calls. Is that a lead indicator that they're going to quit? That's number one. The second one is actually, to my surprise, and it's the nature of the people we work with, I think. I can't travel. I can't really go to the office. I can't go to these conferences. What do I do with my time? Those are the two biggest questions. They probably don't come to me with a lot of the finance stuff because they know that they can go to you. But those are the two biggest questions: is should I be concerned? There's no data that suggests people are going to leave, but they stop showing up to calls. They got to take their kids through virtual school instead of show up to our coaching call, stuff like that. And then we do have, I have clients that have clients, and their biggest concern is, or the biggest question, which is actually an interesting, what I've done with all my clients, or most of them, is built-in redundancy in their advertising. So a lot of people figured out how to, pay for advertising within these KPIs and yada, yada. Big concern that my clients have is their clients have no idea whether they should cut advertising costs, because it's a pretty big cost. Most of them are direct response, so there is ROI accountability. But do we cut advertising costs, or do we double down and take over more of the market because everybody else is cutting advertising costs? And I have a unique outlook on paid advertising in general, but that's a question actually. Dan, what do you look at when people say, hey, here's where I'm at? I got all these costs to cut. Do I cut advertising? Because half the people are going to say, hey, look, if there's not a direct ROI to it, cut it. Another half of the market, mostly the people selling you advertising, are going to say, no, now is when you double down, right? Expand while people contract, or whatever other rhetoric. So if they come into you, what do you look at let's say they have a big advertising, like they're spending $200,000 a month on advertising. Cut it back, stay the course, or spend more because everybody else is spending less?
Yeah, well, I have issues with the all or nothing thinking and the should statements.
Yep.
So if you guys haven't seen the list of 10 cognitive distortions, these are basically things that if you're utilizing one of them, or most of us utilize on average 3 of them, they're anxiety producers. So should I what? If you're asking, should I be concerned? To me, that means you are concerned. So I am concerned by virtue of asking that question. And you don't need someone to give you permission to be concerned or not. You happen to be concerned. My framework then is to go, okay, how do we hedge these downside risks, right? So the downside risk in the scenario of, hey, clients are not showing up. Well, we speculate, right, and probably reasonably accurate, that they're probably not showing up because they got a situation like mine, which is right now Noella's on a iPad over there. You can see that she's got a little bit of a disaster zone, which is definitely kicking up my OCD. But reasonable to assume that a lot of them aren't showing up because they've got kids, or they're trying to get their head above water because their clients are going away. So it's reasonable to anticipate, or the downside risk is that some of your clients are going to go away. So what are you going to do about it to try to hedge that downside risk as much as possible? And so that's an opportunity to think differently about your offer. Maybe they can't show up to a live call, but is there something else? Could you send them a transcript? It might be easier for them to read a transcript while their kids are watching stuff on their iPads and doing virtual learning. So what are all the ways that you can hedge downside risk? And any new ideas that we come up with, we put through the 4 lenses that I shared with yesterday. There's 2 that are qualitative, 2 that are quantitative, and we have to be able to say yes to at least 2 of those lenses. The qualitative ones are, will this new thing that I'm doing, business, idea, strategy, will it be a forcing function? Will it be a time savings? So those are the 2 qualitative lenses. The 2 quantitative lenses are, will it be revenue producing, and will it reduce expenses? So for the 2 qualitative lenses, the forcing function and the time savings, those are more from your experience. There isn't necessarily a preponderance of data to support the conclusion, so it's more of a gut check on whether or not you can check one of those 2 boxes. But for the revenue producing or expense reduction, that's where we need a preponderance of data to support the conclusion. So how are we actually, some factual or objective data that supports, yes, this will produce revenue, or yes, this will cut expenses. So so we go through the hedging our downside risks. We come up with these ideas about this concern that we have, or this risk that we have about clients going away. We come up with a bunch of different ideas. Then we run them through those 4 lenses. We have to check the box on at least 2 of the 4, and to the extent to which we have more than one idea that we've checked at least 2 boxes on, then we sort it based off order of magnitude, and then that tells us what actions to take. So this is just my methodology. We talked about this in length in the whole cash flow engineering series that you all can get access to. So that's how I process, and that's how I am processing issues, uh, because we have the same challenge. We have, most of the last few weeks have been clients who've been reaching out with uh, concerns that they have, and that their business essentially, especially those that are in any sort of tourism, entertainment, restaurant, retail, or adjacent to those, that kind of their businesses um, evaporated overnight. So what do we do? And some of them have come up some really interesting new businesses that aren't necessarily going to be the business, but it's going to be the business for the next 90 days because they have existing assets within their business uh, where there is a need currently that they can tackle. So that doesn't really answer the question of should I cut advertising or should I double down. That's an all or nothing. That's a either I cut advertising or I don't. And again, that's one of the 10 cognitive distortions. So it's rarely all or nothing. Um, and so our our method, and there's a lot of, I ranted about it the other day about seeing a lot of marketers with self-interested posts about how there's no better time to get into marketing or starting an online business or whatever you do, don't cut your marketing budget. And that's beautifully simplistic, and it sounds really cool. Like it sounds great, um, but it's just loaded with an overgeneralization, which is one of the other 10 cognitive distortions. So, how do we actually work through it? Well, one, I think any marketing is gambling. Uh, it's gambling, and if you're 100% commission and you don't have any extra money, should you really be gambling? Arguably, no. I think if someone came to you and they said, "I'm about to run out of money. I got $100 left. Should I spend this on? Uh, should I take it to the casino?" Unfortunately, right now you couldn't actually take it to the casino because they're closed. But in this example, should I take it to the casino? You'd probably say no. What are your priorities? You can't risk losing this money. So when you're down to the last few bucks, this whole idea of like I should spend money on marketing, I just don't align with, because you're gambling. You're betting that there's going to be some outcome. And right now, there's not a preponderance of data. You can't use your historical data to extrapolate out what's going to happen because we don't have data most likely in our business that would be a proxy for what's happening currently. So you're really just using subjective data, from your perspective, what you think is going to happen, or phenomenological data based off your experience. Well, guess what? You probably haven't had an experience like this before. So both those data sets are flawed. Our framework, again, is we have a reserve for salary, we have a reserve for operating expenses, and we set up a reserve for investments, which is anything new that we're doing or anything we're betting on. And so to the extent to which we have money in our betting account, then we take all of the possible scenarios, options that we have, and we run them through the kind of four lenses that we talked about a few moments ago, to rank order the best idea to the worst idea, and then we execute on the first idea. We're not going to maximize and try to do all of them at once. We don't have the resources to do that. So if you don't have those reserve accounts, then now is not the time probably to be spending your way out of a problem. So just on the surface, if you go like, I'm tight on money, I'd like to spend my way out of this. Like, and if someone just said it to you that way, you go like, what are you talking about? Like, you're going to spend your way out of, like you're almost out of money. That sounds like you're going to be out quickly. Or maybe you're going to get lucky. But what you're actually doing is creating more uncertainty, because you just put this money at risk. So we created more uncertainty. So if we have money in a reserve account specifically designated for investments, then yeah, now's the time to leverage that. If we don't, then we need to go through the whole plus minus list, hedging our downside risks, that whole methodology, examining our cash flow, and seeing if we can free something up.
Yep. Keep in mind too, just a reminder, most people on here know this because they've been in our world. You don't have to stop marketing, right? But there are different currencies we use. Time is one. So sometimes we pay for advertising in exchange for time. We don't have enough time. We have extra money. We can pay to put the message out there. But there's time, there's relationships, there's a lot of other stuff. So it's not to say I don't have money so that I cannot market. It's I don't have this in my reserves, so I cannot pay for advertising, which is a little bit different. And some people, again, all or nothing. Like, well, if I can't pay for advertising, I can't grow my business. And that is a form of inaccurate thinking. You cannot pay money to try to grow your business right now. You can leverage relationships. You can go knock on doors. You can pick up the phone and call people, all that stuff. So just point out another form of all or nothing is maybe there is this way that you've marketed your business. Just because you cannot use this way does not mean you can no longer market your business. You may just have to use a different currency.
Yeah, and as we come out of this, to the extent to which you've held on to your cash, so we're weathering the storm, hopefully it's 3 months or less, we're weathering the storm. As we come out, guess what? All of our competitors spent all of their cash betting on things that didn't pay off. You now have the cash. Things are coming back online. Now the data supports taking action. You have the cash to take that action. Now you're back in the game. You're ramping up substantially faster than the other folks who tried to spend their way through this because they got scared.
Mm-hmm. And more than likely, assuming that you tried, whatever you came up with that was not paying, right? Whatever creative solution you came up with that was not using cash is probably going to be a huge benefit as well, and probably provide synergy to your paid efforts. So for example, if you just said, I'm going to triple down on referrals and just really communicate with all my clients because I'm not going to pay for advertising. You come out on the other side with cash in hand and a nice army of people that want to refer to you.
Yeah, I think the bigger risk for these paid advertising type firms is that they have their clients, because they're inherently biased of my service is paid advertising, so then I'm biased to tell you should keep doing paid advertising. Well, their clients blow through all the money. Are they going to, and then we get through this on the other side and hopefully 3 months or less. And guess what? All those clients are no longer your clients.
Yep.
Or they're not probably going to continue to engage you. So short side, you playing the short game here. We want to play the long game. So got to think through that downside risk. Downside risk is my clients blow all their money in the short term. Now they're not clients of mine when we come out the other end because I couldn't get results for them. And this is a results-based business. So it would seem to me that potentially the bigger risk is that you're not advising your clients correctly in the short term. And that when we come out of this, which we will, long term is you don't have any clients. You got to start from zero. So how can you advise your clients in the best possible way now, knowing that you might take a hit, such that when we come out of this, they're still your clients.
Yep.
But we're right up at the hour. Wednesdays is the day that we normally do this. We do for an hour. Usually we teach something. So we plan to teach the whole framework we built on when to pivot your business. Doesn't seem very appropriate right now.
Yeah, no, not right now.
We had two things lined up: how to help your parents retire and when to pivot your business. Both seem kind of inappropriate to focus on right now. So normally on Wednesdays we do that. And so now, right now we're doing these weekly or daily, Monday through Friday calls. Just longer on Wednesdays since we already had an hour set aside. So tomorrow will be more like a half hour, and Friday as well. But I've got experts coming on from Bernstein and BNY Mellon. So bring your market questions, bring your economy questions if you want to. I think somebody asked the other day about what the Fed is doing and how does that impact the economy. And we got the Fed putting the rate to 0, what does that mean? So good folks to answer those types of questions. And also from my initial conversations with them, they had, for their clients, they'd already priced in or anticipated recession, not necessarily in the way and manner in which it's happened, but if you're approaching things from a risk-adjusted perspective, you're just going to have a different perspective, knowing that there are cycles and we come out of these cycles. So make sure you're well positioned.
Risk adjusted. Awesome.
Okay. Thanks,
So we'll send a link. I'll hit a replay. So if you're here, I'll make sure you get a replay. We have a little delay, maybe 24, 48 hours. And make sure you get an invite for it tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, everyone. All right. See you tomorrow.